I want to begin in volume 13, January the 14th, 1922. The Most Holy Trinity is inaccessible light. That's, I think it's 2 Timothy 6, verses 15 to 16. I think it's 2, otherwise it's 1 Timothy. So Luisa said, I found myself outside of myself, and I saw the heavens opened and a light inaccessible to any creature. Now this light is God. God is one God in 3 persons. I want to give you 1 John 1:5, that God is light. I want to give you John 8:12, where Jesus said, I am the light of the world, and John 9:5 as well. Okay, so she sees this inaccessible light. Rays descending from within this light, which invested all creatures, celestial, terrestrial, and purging. Look at the 3 kingdoms, heaven, earth, and purgatory. These rays were so dazzling that though remaining invested, enraptured, and delighted, one would not know how to describe anything of which they contained. Naturally enough, if you are completely taken up and absorbed in the extraordinary light of the sun, it's very difficult to separate yourself from that so you can actually describe it. Just like the fish can't describe what it is like to be in the sea. It's their reality. And then the first thing she sees is rays that are so dazzling you couldn't possibly describe them. And then she comes to a second level and she says there were rays that were less dazzling. And one could describe the beauty, the happiness and the truths that they contained. However, the power of the light was such that I didn't know whether my little mind would ever be capable of going back into myself again. If my Jesus had not stirred me with his words, no human force would have pulled me back from that light to call me back to earthly life. Because that's what's going to happen to us in death, that we will see this incredible light. We will be able to see God for the first time. And we are drawn so completely into it, the soul just flies off to God. Now, the very difficult thing for the mystics like Luisa is to have to come back and pick up terrestrial life again. All of them say it's complete martyrdom when you have seen the reality. That's why God doesn't let us see it, because we wouldn't want to stay on the earth. And that's why the scriptures say that nobody can see God and live. That's what God said to Moses when Moses went up the mountain in Exodus to speak to God for 40 days and 40 nights. In chapter 34, Moses said, let me see you, Lord. And God said, you cannot see me and live. That means that if you see me, you will die, you will go, you won't come back. But alas, Luisa said, I'm still unworthy of my dear celestial fatherland. My unworthiness forces me to wander in exile. Oh, how hard this is for me. I want to give you 2 Corinthians 5, verses 1 to 10 there, where St. Paul said he too wanted to throw off the tent of the flesh and go to God. But because of the mission that was given to him, he had to stay. That's exactly Luisa's position. Then Jesus told Luisa, my daughter, let us go back together into your bed. This is God's will for her, no matter how painful it is. And sometimes God's will for us is also painful. But if it is his will, that's what you surrender to, because that's the only thing that can happen. What you see, Jesus said, is the Most Holy Trinity, as though holding all creatures in the palm of his hand. And as it gives life, preserves, purges, and delights from its mere breath, there's no creature which does not hang upon it. In other words, if the Blessed Trinity doesn't continuously give us the breath of life, we would cease to exist so completely that there would be no remains. The light of the Blessed Trinity is inaccessible to the created mind. That's that text from, I think it's 2 Timothy 6, verses 15 to 16. If anyone wanted to enter, he said, It would be the same as would happen to a person who wanted to enter into a great fire. Not having sufficient heat and power to face this fire, he would be consumed by the fire. Now, several times in the scriptures you come across the statement that our God is a consuming fire. For example, Exodus 19 to 24, those verses where God showed himself as fire on Mount Sinai. And you have Deuteronomy 4:24, and in the New Testament you've got Hebrews 12:29. Now, as you go through these volumes, you realise that God is a consuming fire. And when he comes to us, he consumes all the dross that's in us and gets rid of it to make it possible for him to actually have a place in us. That's like us getting rid of rubbish to make room for something that is worthwhile. But after burning away all the dross, he has to refine us like silver and gold. And that is a much deeper, more penetrating fire. St. John of the Cross is the person who spoke about the two purifications. The first one everyone goes through, that's the ordinary purification of life. And the second one is the second deepest dark night of the soul. And a lot of people don't agree to that. They won't agree to their intellect, their memory and their will, their motivations, their desires, everything being purified like silver and gold. That is very painful. But the fire of God has to consume it. Because if the fire of God doesn't consume it, we cannot become a living flame of love. It's actually that simple. If God is fire, we have to be transformed into fire. If God is love, we have to be transformed into love. If God is light, we have to be transformed into light. Why? Because we're going to live with him forever. So they would be consumed by the fire. I remember having an experience in Africa, West Africa, many years ago, for the first time seeing a pillar of fire. I'd read about it in scriptures, wondered had anybody ever seen such a thing. And when I saw it, it was so attractive that I began to move towards it. But somebody who was living in Africa longer than I was grabbed me from the back and pulled me back and said, if you go even a little bit closer to that, you will die. That is pure electricity. That is pure power. You would be burnt up in seconds. And I realised our God is light. Our God is a consuming fire. But the attractiveness of it was, I couldn't explain. So, if anyone wanted to enter into that fire, Jesus said, it would be the same as a person who wanted to enter into a great fire, not having sufficient heat and power to face such a thing. He'd be consumed by it. Therefore, being extinguished, he would never be able to say either how much or what kind of heat the fire contained, naturally because the fire had consumed him. Now, the first group, the rays that were totally dazzling, Jesus says, these are the rays, are the divine virtues. Some virtues are less adaptable to the created mind. We can't rationalise it or tease it out. This is why the created mind is delighted by them. It can see them, but is unable to describe anything. You're just dazzled by the sheer magnificence. The other ones, where she said other rays were less dazzling, the other virtues, he said, which are more adaptable to the human mind, can be described. But you can describe them like a stutterer would do, because no one can speak about them in a way which is right and worthy. The virtues which are more adaptable to the human mind are love, mercy, goodness, beauty, justice, and knowledge. Therefore, together with me, let us send our homage to the Most Holy Trinity in the name of all, to thank the most adorable Trinity, to praise it and to bless it. Because God is a pure spirit, for so much goodness towards his creatures. Okay, let's come back a bit. The rays that are less dazzling, he said, these are the ones that are more adaptable to the human mind, which we've just described. And if you were trying to describe them, it would be like a stutterer. Now, if you go to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 1, you find the prophet Ezekiel trying to describe an extraordinary vision of God on his throne and his power. And by the time he's finished describing it, he has you completely mesmerised. You'd have to be somebody who was a great artist to keep drawing what is you're reading about. And then you might have some ability to say, oh, that's what he's talking about. Also, if you go to Revelation chapters 4 and 5, St. John the Evangelist also is the only other person who made an attempt to describe the throne of God. But what he did was that he kept to a very simple image of a king's throne and to describe the creatures that were nearest to it. So he kept himself out of trouble by not actually going in to try and describe the exotic nature of the whole thing. I mean, how do you describe love, mercy, goodness, beauty, justice, and knowledge, these attributes of God? And yet, you know, if you go to Galatians 5:22, St. Paul says that these are the fruits of the Spirit, because when we come into union with God, this is exactly what God does. Every single time we fuse with him, as he has told us, another layer is actually put on the painting that you are, that is to be transformed into Christ. So, let's come to January the 17th, 1922. Every good that the creature does is a sip of life that she gives to her soul. And that's magnificent. So, this time you're talking about soul food. How do you feed your soul? Luisa said she was following the passion of Jesus. In one instance, she found herself outside of herself, and she saw Jesus being dragged along the streets, trampled, beaten, more than in the passion itself. In other words, she was seeing a much more up-to-date version of the passion. He was being treated in such a barbaric way as to be repugnant to the sight. I approached my Jesus, she said, to snatch him from under the feet of those enemies who looked like many incarnate demons. And then he threw himself into my arms as if he was waiting for me to defend him, and I brought him to my bed. Then, after quite a few minutes of silence, as though wanting to rest, he said, "My daughter, have you seen how vice and passions triumph in these sad times?" That's what I said. It was the passion of Jesus, but in a much more modern setting. So Jesus has often told her about the moral problems that are in the church and in the world, and the terrible chastisements that needed to come to purify it all. Now she's seeing this in a graphic way by seeing Jesus as suffering the passion again. He said how victoriously vice and passions walk along the streets today. Now, if that was true a century ago, it's much more true now as we speak. While good is trampled upon, beaten and annihilated. I am good. Now, it will be a wonderful list to make in these writings, starting from volume 1, where Jesus starts saying, I am faith, I am hope, I am love, I am grace. Okay? He says, I am good. I'm leaving some of them out so you can look for them. I am good, he said. There's no good that a creature may do in which I am not involved. I want to give you John 15:5 for that. Without me, you can do nothing. And I want to give you the complementary text that goes with that, Philippians 4:13, that I can do all things in Christ who gives me the strength. Now, Every good that the creature does is a sip of life that she gives to her soul. That's a very important statement. Every good that the creature does is a sip of life that she gives to her soul. Therefore, the more good acts she does, the more the life of her soul grows, rendering her stronger and more disposed to do more good acts. So each time we do good acts, that enables us to do more and more and more. However, in order to be exempt from any poisonous substance, these acts must be upright, without human purpose, and only to please me. Now, what Jesus is saying is that our acts must be pure, very pure in motivation, in order to be accepted by him. If there's anything in it for self, forget about it, it's unacceptable to him. It must be pure love, because he is pure love. And if we are loving pure love, we can only love him with a pure love. Love can be loved by love alone. And love can be served by love alone. Love can be repaid by love alone. Otherwise, Jesus said, the most beautiful act, the holiest in appearance. Who knows how much poison they contain? Now that poison is the human will, sinful desires, selfish motivations, and everything that spoils. And I, being pure good, shun these contaminated acts, and I do not communicate life to them. So I want to give you Habakkuk 1:13. Lord, your eyes are too holy to look upon sin. I want to give you Hebrews 12:14. Nothing unholy or unworthy can enter the presence of God. I want to give you Matthew 7:25. Not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will get into the kingdom of heaven. Maybe I should give you Mark. Maybe that should be Mark 7:25 as well, where Jesus says that all evil comes out of the heart. It comes from inside of us. Contaminated acts. So again, to give you an example I've given you before, if I tell somebody I'm going to fast tomorrow, but in the back of my mind I would like to lose a little bit of weight, that's a contaminated act and utterly, completely useless to God. Probably completely useless to me as well. I may not lose the weight. So as you go through St. John's Gospel, you will hear over and over and over again, I only do what my Father tells me to do. Everything that Jesus does is done out of obedience and with perfect and pure love. So if we offer him contaminated acts, forget about it, he doesn't communicate life to that. They're not acceptable. So, therefore, although it seems that they do good, their good is empty of life. The creatures feed themselves with food that gives them death, foods that kill them. Evil strips the soul of the garment of grace. It deforms her. It forces her to swallow poison so as to make her die immediately. Die immediately means sin, fall, break with God. Poor creatures, made for life, made for happiness, made for beauty, and sin does nothing but give them sips of death, sips of unhappiness, sips of ugliness, which, taking all vital humours away from the soul, make of her dry wood to burn with greater intensity in hell. That's pretty strong. But they're Jesus' words. And he knows what he's talking about. So let's come to January the 20th, 1922. What the soul who lives in the divine will should do with her rags. I think that's rather interesting. Luisa said she was all concerned, with the addition that she saw herself so bad that only Jesus could know her miserable state, and so on. So Jesus came and said to her, "My daughter, why do you oppress yourself? Do you know how one's own things are in my will?" Your own things is everything to do with the human will, everything to do with the earth and the low world and the low spiritualities and blah, blah, blah. Everything that's not divine will. He said, "They're seen as many miserable rags and tatters, which give more dishonour than honour to the soul, and remind her that she used to be a poor one, and possessed not even one garment that was whole." That's us in all our miseries. So for this I want to give you Ezekiel chapter 16 verses 1 to 14, which is the wonderful allegory of the chosen people being called from nothing, literally naked, and the Lord takes them and makes them into the people of God. So he gets us naked as well, because nakedness means no grace, no redemption. "When I want to call a soul into my will," he said, "that she may establish her dwelling in it, I act like a great lord who would want to take one of the poorest women into his palace, so that laying down her clothes," that's the issue for us, laying down the human will. Okay, if we don't lay down the human will, we can't have the divine will. You can't have two wills inside of you, only one. Jesus had two natures, but he had one will, the divine will, because his human will was completely surrendered to the divine. She must put down her clothes as a poor one. She may be clothed, so if she lays them down, she may be clothed according to his condition. That's us being lifted up into the divine will. Living together with him and sharing in all of his goods. I mean, that's the story of Cinderella. Now, this lord goes around all the streets of the city, and he finds one of the poorest women, homeless, without a bed, covered only in filthy rags. He takes her and he brings her to his palace as the triumph of his love. You see, if you give to somebody like yourself, that's not a triumph. That's just a sharing. But if you give it to somebody who's totally unworthy of it, then you have a triumph of your love, and that's what mercy is. Love given to somebody who doesn't deserve it. And that's his attitude towards us, that it is complete mercy. We cannot, no matter what we do, deserve or merit in any way the gifts that he gives to us. So, however, the king orders this nobody to lay down her rags, to clean herself, and to clothe herself with the most beautiful garments, as the garments of the divine will. And in order to keep no memory of her poverty, to burn her rags. That is, get rid of the past. And so I have to remind you of, I think it's Isaiah 43. Now, the verses are in front of my face, but I can't remember them, where he says, there's no need to remember the past. There's no need to remember what has gone before. Behold, I am doing something completely new. I am making a road in the wilderness. The wilderness is our lives. So we've got to let go of the past. And you've got to burn the rags. Again, Hebrews 12:14, nothing unholy or unworthy can enter the presence of God. In fact, since he is extremely rich, he does not admit anything into his house which gives of poverty. Now, if the poor one sadly misses her rags, that's a very important statement there, because we are attached to things. We're even attached to our own opinion. We're attached to the way we do things. I've always done it like this. We're attached to it. And so we may be slow to let it go in order to receive something better. So, if the poor one sadly misses her rags and afflicts herself because she has brought nothing of her own, would she not offend the goodness and the magnanimity of her Lord? Okay, So I want to give you Isaiah 35:8. I want to give you Hebrews 12:14. Nothing unholy or unworthy can enter the presence of God. You've got to get rid of the rags. I want to give you Revelation 22:15 and Revelation 21:27. Now, what kind of person does the Lord choose? This nobody. This nobody is described in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 26 to 31, where St. Paul says, look at yourself. Who were you when you were called? Were you a big somebody? No, he calls the nobodies of this earth, the weak things, to confound the strong. He said, that's the way I am. And if that Lord goes round the city, I go around the whole world, he said. Maybe I go around all generations. And wherever I find the littlest and the poorest one, I take her and place her in the eternal sphere of my volition, saying to her, work together with me in my will. What is mine is yours. If you've something of your own, lay it down, because in the sanctity and in the immense riches of my will, it's nothing but miserable rags. Now, of course, he's explaining to Luisa her own call as well as yours and mine. So he finds the littlest and the poorest one and gives her the best. That's Psalm 113, verse 7. He raises the poor from the dust and makes them sit among princes. Now, all of this is his own magnanimous, extraordinary, merciful love. All of it. So, he continues, wanting to have one's own merits is of servants and slaves. Oh dear. Look at Luke 17:10. But that's the problem that we have today. And it's independence, including independence of God, which of course is pride. And we were told to assert ourselves. Whatever you have, flaunt it. Sell yourself. Push yourself. Blah, blah, blah. All of that is the exact opposite of what you should do. Wanting to have one's own merits in the eyes of God is the condition of a servant or a slave. It's not the condition of sons and daughters who receive everything openly and freely from him and give everything back freely to him. What belongs to the Father belongs to his children. Galatians 4:7. Besides, what are the merits that you could acquire compared to one single act in the divine will? I think that's brilliant. We can read lives of saints who did the most ferocious penances. I don't know if you can take that, I can't. He says, what is all that stuff compared to one act in the divine will? We have extraordinary treasures. All merits have their own little value, weight and measure. But who could ever measure one single act in my will? Nobody. Nobody. It demonetizes all currencies. In other words, it makes all currencies on the planet of no value whatsoever. The gem is so great, it cannot be priced. No one, he said, no one. And then, what are your merits compared to mine? I mean, we're absolute nothings. We're beyond nobodies. We cannot compare with God. St. Michael the Archangel has a name which means, who is like God? The answer is no one. In my will, he said, you'll find everything. And I will make you the owner. That's the incredible thing. Aren't you happy? So then he goes on and he says, listen, my daughter, I want you to leave everything aside. Now, theoretically, we're pretty good on that, and we say, yeah, we agree, until it comes to the point. And you mightn't even give away your best pen. And if you have a very special rosary beads, and somebody wants it, whoops, Are you going to give it away? I remember being tested on that very point many years ago when I came back from Rome and I had been personally given a rosary by Pope John Paul II. Within 2 days, a neighbour asked me for it, and I knew the difficulty of letting it go. I knew I would never get another one. I knew it was a rosary given to me by a saint. But she asked, and I had to give it. I want you to leave everything aside. Your mission is immense, he said, and more than words, it is acts that I expect from you. The mission given to us is the hidden life in Nazareth, but it is full of action for the salvation of souls and for the foundation of the new era and putting in new foundations into the church. I want you to be in continuous act in my will. I want the strolling of your thoughts in my will, which strolling over all human intelligences may lay the mantle of my will over all created minds. Now there is an extremely important statement that we have to turn into prayer. That I surrender my will to the divine will. I surrender my intelligence into the divine intelligence so that he can lay a mantle over all the intelligences of creatures, a mantle of his divine will. And he can lay this over all created minds. And rising up to the throne of the Eternal One, I want you to offer all human thoughts sealed with the honour and the glory of my divine will. That's a very important act that he wants from us. Then, number 2, lay the mantle of my will over all human gazes. 3, over all human words. As though placing your eyes and your words in a stroll over all the gazes and words of creatures and sealing them with my will, rise before the Supreme Majesty once again and offer the homage as if all had used the sight and the speech according to my will. And if you do the same, if you work, that's number 4, if you breathe, number 5, if your heart beats, number 6, may your strolling be continuous. So this is going to lay a mantle of the divine will over absolutely every part of the human being, enabling the human race to be able to turn and begin to turn back to God. Your way is extremely long, he said. It is all eternity that you have to cover. And if you knew how much you lose with just one stop of yours, and how you deprive me not of a human honour but of a divine honour, these are the merits which you should fear losing, not your rags and your miseries. Let them go. Therefore, he said, more attention in doing your runs in the divine will. I love that expression, your runs. And that means, you're running from the divine will down to help human beings, and you're running from helping human beings back to the divine will as well. And so you're going back and forth, back and forth. That's the ladder of John 1:51. And Luisa is the angel of God going up and down that ladder to give God all the glory from the human race and to give all God's gifts to the human race. And there she is. An angel is a messenger. So she's a terrestrial angel doing this work. And that's what we're called to be as well, terrestrial angels. Now let's come to January the 25th, 1922. Each truth contains within itself a distinct beatitude, happiness, joy, and beauty. This is lovely. Jesus said, my daughter, the more truths I manifest to you, the more specialities of beatitude I give to you as a gift. Now, each truth is a gift. And with each truth, we have a happiness and a beatitude going with it. And he says that when he gives us special angles on things, these are specialities of beatitudes. And eventually we've got to wake up and realise the detail with which he is trying to create something incredible inside of us. Each truth contains within itself a distinct beatitude, a distinct happiness, a distinct joy, and a distinct beauty. So, every additional truth that you know brings beatitude, happiness, joy, and beauty into yourself, because you've taken it into yourself, with which you are enriched. But these truths are also divine seeds. That the soul receives, and by manifesting them to others, she communicates these seeds. Now notice the importance of us manifesting these truths to other people. We have to be involved, sharing with others. This is not for yourself alone. If we don't share this with others, then it means we are not furthering the kingdom of the divine will. And as we go on, Jesus is going to come back to this point again and again and again and again to tell us we have to share this with others. And I want to underline it. So initially we're all pupils, and then we all become teachers. Just like the apostles were disciples first, and they were masters afterwards. These are the divine seeds that the soul receives, and by manifesting them to others, she communicates these seeds and enriches whomever receives them. So that's like saying, I get this bag of seeds in a shop, and if I plant them all over my garden, I'm going to have a wonderful harvest. But nothing will happen if those seeds are not planted somewhere. And so if these seeds are planted in us, we've got to start planting them in the hearts and souls of others. Now, since the truths that one has known on earth are divine seeds, which sprout with beatitudes and joy and happiness and peace and so on, when the soul is in her fatherland in heaven, they will be like electric wires of communication through which the divinity will release from its womb so many acts of beatitude as many truths as she has known. Now there will be such variety here because people, some receive more, some receive less. Some do more and some do less. And so depending on our response to the divine will, there will be a vast variety of saints in heaven. Oh, how inundated the soul will be, as though by many different immense seas. She already has the seed, and by having the seed, she has the space in which to receive these immense seas. Now, first of all, you're talking about a seed, which is very, very small. And then all of a sudden, you're sharing these with others, and you don't realise the Lord is putting a sea, S-E-A, inside of you. And then he says it goes on to become immense seas of happiness, joy, and beauty. So the more you share, the more you actually receive. To give is to receive. One who does not have the seed, who has not known a truth while on earth, lacks the space to be able to receive these beatitudes. Because we've said already, we are a space for God to work. That's why he says, give me the field. The field is a space. Give me the field and let me do. It's the same as happens to a little one who did not want to study all the languages in school. As he grows up and hears these languages being spoken, which he didn't want to study, or which he was not given the opportunity of studying, he will understand nothing. In fact, by not wanting to study, his intelligence remains closed, and he has no he made no effort to prepare a little space in order to understand these languages. At the most, he will be amazed and he will enjoy from somebody else's happiness, but he won't possess it. That's like saying, I didn't learn French, but I can benefit from going somewhere with another person who does learn French, so I can enjoy it, but I don't possess it. Nor will he be the cause of happiness for anybody else because he doesn't possess it. See then what it means to know one more truth, or one truth less. If all knew what great goods they miss, they would compete in order to acquire more truths. Now, the truths are what my book calls the secretaries of my Beatitudes. Now, a secretary seems to be somebody who gives things to other people and does work for the master to give things to other people. And if I do not manifest them to souls, they do not break the secret which they contain. So, if from the statement here, I want to change the word secretary to container, like a box or a case. He says the truth is like a case of Beatitudes. And if it's not broken open, how can the Beatitudes be given to you? Somebody has to break it open. And therefore, somebody has to teach this stuff to others. So I believe that teaching this material to other people is utterly crucial to spreading the kingdom of the divine will. So, the truths are the containers of my Beatitudes, and if I do not manifest them to soul, they do not break the secret that they contain. They swim within my divinity, waiting for their turn to act as divine agents and to make me known. How many more Beatitudes I contain, he said. So no matter how much we give out to others, there's always more, always more, always more. And the longer they have remained hidden in my womb, the more uproariously and majestically they come out to inundate the creatures to manifest my glory. So he's like his desire is like a dam that bursts and pours out all its contents on anything that will receive it. The moment you open up to divine will, he's in faster than you said yes. He wants so badly to come and reign upon the earth and to use us to be the little stairway that he can use to come into the earth. But what a wonderful privilege on our part. Do you believe that all heaven, he said, that means all the saints in heaven, are aware of all my goods? He said, no, it's going to take us all eternity to get to know everything about God. And at the end of eternity, we won't know everything about him. And by we, I mean all creatures. I don't just mean you and me as individuals. That's why nobody will ever be bored in heaven. You'll be far too busy getting to know God and learning all the new things that he's showing to you and living them. Each creature, do you believe, he said, that everyone in heaven is aware of all my goods? He says, no. Oh, how much remains for it to enjoy. That's for the saints to enjoy, which they don't enjoy today. Each creature who enters into heaven, having known one more truth, that means than the others, which was unknown to the others, will carry within himself the seed so as to have new contentments, new joys, new beauty released from me. So, since all of the saints before Luisa were not in the divine will, then all of us who come after her in the divine will, we bring gifts to the saints in heaven. It's massive. And these souls will be their cause and their source, while the others will take part in them. That's the souls in the divine will who bring these gifts from the earth with them into heaven will be the cause of the others enjoying them. No wonder the saints are batting for us to really get into this. The last day will not come if I do not find souls who are disposed, so that I may reveal all my truths. That's the thing he's after. Not that you'd know one or two, but that the church would get to the point of knowing God. Knowing as much as a creature can know about God. And to know this on the earth. And to give God the glory and the praise that is his due on the earth. The last day will not come if I do not find souls who are disposed, so that I may reveal all my truths, so that the celestial Jerusalem may resound with my complete glory, and all the blessed may share in all of my beatitudes, not in the few that they knew going to heaven themselves. Some as the direct cause for having known that truth, and some as the indirect cause because they had not known it while they were on the earth. So it means that we who are living the divine will have an extraordinary and extremely important role vis-a-vis the saints in heaven, as well as the souls on earth. You can see why Jesus says that souls in the divine will have to be first. They've such a job to do. Now, Jesus said, "My daughter, in order to console you, and so that you may be more attentive to listening to my truths, I want to tell you which ones are the truths that glorify me the most." Oh, we need to know that. Okay? They are those which regard my will. Because we know lots of stuff about creation, we know lots of stuff about redemption. But Jesus says the ones that he pays most attention to now, not then. Because as he was going through that whole redemptive cycle, all his attention was given to that. But now that he's giving his attention to the sanctification cycle, so all his attention is there. So he says, I want to tell you those truths that glorify me the most. They are those that regard my will, since the primary reason for which I created man was that he be one with his creator. Now, up to this you've been told that the primary reason why man was created was to do the will of God. Okay? And here we're told that the primary reason was that he would be one with his creator. But of course, if you have the divine will in you, and you've surrendered your human will, you are doing the will of God. So this is just a secondary way of approaching the same thing. But man, having withdrawn from my will, rendered himself unworthy to know the value, the effects, and all the truths that the divine will contains. This is the reason for all my attention to you, he said, now that he's trying to open the kingdom of the divine will. That between me and you, our wills would run together and be always in highest accord. In fact, so that the soul may open the doors and become disposed to knowing the truths that my will contains, the first thing is wanting to live in my will. The second thing is wanting to know it. That means to understand it. And the third thing is wanting to appreciate it. Now, these are the three very important things at the beginning. You want to live in the divine will, therefore you want to know all about it, and therefore you want to come to a point of appreciating it. Well, you won't appreciate it unless you continuously read and study these writings of Luisa. There's no hope of you doing it without that, because you won't find this material anywhere else. Therefore, with you, he said, Luisa, I opened the doors of my will, that you might know its secrets, which man had buried inside of my womb, that is, with our rebellion. And not only had he buried it, but he buried also its effects and the value it contains. And as many truths as you come to know about my will, so many seeds you receive. Now, he said that before. Each truth is a seed. The number of truths you gain is a number of seeds that you have that you can share with others. So many seeds you receive, and so many divine containers form within you. Oh, how they make feast around you, he said, having found one to whom to confide their secret. But they will make the most beautiful feast when they will bring you to heaven, when the divinity at your very entrance will release so many different beatitudes of joy and happiness and beauty, all differing among themselves, which will not only inundate you, but will inundate all the blessed in heaven as well. Oh, how heaven awaits your coming to enjoy all of these new contentments. It's absolutely glorious. So I'm going to leave it there for now.